looking at our churches in a prime spot. Where else will you find victims, potential young people in an area? Where else will they get access so easily? We trust so much, don't we, as Christians? We trust everyone that comes in. And it's a great thing to do, but in my line of work, I don't. Because not everyone that comes in has the heart of Christ. And so safeguarding means we have to be aware. Today you're going to learn about indicators. Because you have to be aware of what someone's telling you. If something's wrong, the human body is designed by God in a way to tell you. If someone is going through something that is wrong, their body will be screaming out to you, something is wrong. But if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll walk past it every single day. And you'll never find out till something major happens. And at that point, you're like, why didn't you tell me? They were telling you. We just didn't know what we were looking for. And so I've got lots and lots of slides. I'm really mindful of my time. There's going to be conversations and bits and pieces. But safeguarding is the action taken to promote the welfare of children, young people, and vulnerable adults, and to protect them from harm. See, often we limit safeguarding to children. It's not just children. An adult can become vulnerable due to circumstances, due to mental health, due to illness, due to anything. Any condition that takes away someone's ability to make rational choices or to be able to manage their choices or their decision makes them vulnerable. So you could have someone in church that's been tithing for 10 years, perfectly fine. They suffer a stroke, and you keep taking tithe for them. You need to recheck that they have the capacity to make that decision. If not, you could be accused of breaching safeguarding. And so these are things that we don't think of. There are certain conditions which limit someone's capacity, because the key word in this is the capacity to make a choice. So if someone does not have the capacity, they're vulnerable. And so as leaders, we've got to be aware. There's lots of information on there. I'm not going to go through everything. I'm happy to provide bits and pieces of this information because there is a lot. I'm very wordy. Everyone that knows me knows I'm quite wordy. I have a strong inner nerd thing, and I quite like that. So this is the definition. These are two definitions, and I've listed the CARE Act 2014. It's just so we're aware. And one of the things that I know as Christians don't want to talk about certain things, but there are certain things which are enshrined in law. Gender is enshrined in law. Whether you like it or not, gender is protected. You cannot discriminate against it. You will be shut down in seconds. And so it's to let us know, as believers, we also have to follow the law of the land. We love people. We care for people. We identify where abuse is happening. And so it's really important that we're aware of what makes people vulnerable. So people could be vulnerable due to age. Children lack capacity sometimes. How many of us have seen a child just run across the road? And you're like, what's wrong with you? They lack the capacity to risk assess. And so as the adult, you've got to risk assess. If you walk into this room, and some of this is learning, and it's learning how to risk assess. One of the things that I will mention is it's really important that you have somebody in your church who can do risk assessments. Someone who can look around a room, who can look around and who can risk assess worst case scenarios. I know we don't want to think worst case scenario is true. We never want to think that. But if you don't have risk assessments in place, you will get in trouble. So it's really important. Yeah? One quick question. Why do we have safeguarding procedures and policies? I've got a few answers. One is you have a legal responsibility as a church to protect people from abuse. If you don't, you can be found criminally negligent and be arrested. As a parent, for instance, are you aware that if a woman is suffering domestic violence and she's aware and she doesn't report what her partner is doing to her child, she can be charged and she can be prosecuted under Section 5, even though she did not commit the abuse. So the law there is no bit in the law that says, oh, I wasn't aware. There is no room for ambiguity. If you are aware and you don't do anything, the law will prosecute you, just as though you were the perpetrator. And so it's really important that we act. And I know as Christians it's worrying, oh, what if I get it wrong? I'd rather you got it wrong, but you were trying to keep me safe, than you didn't get it wrong, or you didn't say anything and you let me stay in a situation that meant I was being abused. And 99 times out of 100, I've worked with people who've been abused, and I've got it wrong. I've raised safeguardings that later turned out not to be. But every time, people are grateful that you were looking. They're more grateful that you were looking and you were checking for their welfare than they are that you were being intrusive. So it's really important. Vulnerable people come to church to feel safe, so their guard may be down when they attend church. We come to church and it's a safe atmosphere. How many of us this weekend, you've hugged people you don't completely know their name? How many of you would hug somebody that you don't know their name outside church? One person. And even that one person, I'd advise you not to. Church is the one place where we let our guard down. And if we let our guard down, there are people who are predatory. And unfortunately, we live in a world that is predatory. I spoke to one of our pastors, and she gave me an example of somebody who wrote to the church and said, hi, I'm coming out of prison. I want to be part of your church. I want to this, I want to that. Turned out he was a pedophile. And he was looking for access to a church. And actually, if the pastor hadn't done her due diligence, because we all get excited when a new person turns up, don't we? Now imagine if pastor hadn't done her due diligence and something happened to a child. We'd all be visiting the pastor at Her Majesty's pleasure right now. And it sounds funny, but it's serious. And so we have to be mindful. There are people who are predatory. And it's to say this, predatory people do target churches. They target youth clubs. They target places where they can find their quote-unquote victims in a place. Where else would you get 20, 30 children and have one or two leaders? Where else would you get an adult take somebody else's child to the toilet? You wouldn't let somebody else do it, but in church we do. Oh, it's Auntie so-and-so. Of course you can take him to the toilet. Of course you can. And I tell people, while I love people, I protect my children. And I protect my church. And so it's really important for us that this is a balancing act. It's not about distrusting people, but it's about making sure we're protecting the vulnerable. Because if we're not protecting them, we're keeping the door open for abuse. And finally, the gospel stands against abuse and exploitation. God is not one for abuse or exploitation. And anyone that tells you that it is, that's a lie. That's not who Jesus ever was or ever is. As Christians, we must stand against abuse and exploitation. And it's important that the church be seen to be doing the right thing. How many of us have heard of all the things that happen in churches? And there's a church group that paid out over £1 billion in compensation to child abuse victims. I won't mention them. There are 313 at the moment safeguarding investigations going on into churches and child abuse in the country right now. 313. And that was a few days ago, so that figure may have changed. So if we look at how many, 313 is not a lot. If you look at the number of churches and religious organizations, that shows there's massive underreporting. You know, I've been safeguarding lead for Foursquare for many years. We've had 1 or 2 safeguarding reports. And I've been to churches where I've seen people go boom on other people's children. That's a safeguarding issue. No one should be touching anyone's children. I'm really sorry. Don't get mad at me, but there are ways to discipline. Right. Yeah, I'm Nigerian too, and I don't beat my kids. But my kids know if there's a look I give my children, they know. I've never needed to raise my hand. They know when daddy says no, no means no. If I say it 3 times, they're in trouble. You know, there's ways and means to manage and to discipline without getting angry. You know, and we'll go on later to talk about it, but the thing that makes that sort of discipline dangerous is the anger in it, because it rarely happens when you're calm. It's when you're mad at your child and your hand, boom. If you're mad, don't touch your child. If you're mad, be the adult. And I say that with all the respect in the world. We are the adults. I am the adult in control. I'm not going to get mad and punish a child. I'm going to discipline a child, and they're 2 different things. So on your tables, some tables are sparser than others. If you're on a sparse table, join the table where there's more people. And I want you to just think for the next 5 minutes, and we're going to take 5 minutes and discuss the different types of abuse that we think there are. I'm not going to give you any hints. I'll tell you there are 10. There are 10. But that's the only hint I'll give you. So you've got 5 minutes in your tables. What different types of abuse are there? And please, every table, somebody can just write it down and be the spokesperson for that table. You have 3 minutes left. Okay, 1 minute left. Okay, so our 5 minutes are up. Do we have a volunteer that has really neat handwriting? I can display it, or we can make this slightly more interactive. Make it more interactive. Okay, do we have a volunteer in the audience who has good handwriting? I see hands. I see someone being volunteer. Thank you. If you could come up for us. So how many people got all 10? Yeah. Yeah, some go. Okay, so we're going to get, on each table, we're going to get somebody to call out what you have, what you've written out on each table. And then what we'll do is we'll jot it down, because some are forms of abuse, some you'd be surprised aren't. So it's always really interesting. This is one of the parts that's fun of this. Right, so you've got 9 there. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go around the room. We'll start from this corner, because this corner, you're being well behaved. They've been quite loud. So we'll start from this end. And you're going to call out your types of abuse. And if you have the same things as them, tick it off on your sheet. And at the end, we then should have a list on here, if you can write it out for me as well. Thank you. You are, yes. You're scribing as well, sorry. We need a pen. Okay, so should we call you table 1? If you read out the types of abuse that you have. You can domestic. Okay. Physical. So if you've got this on your list, tick this off. Emotional. Fourth, sexual. So if you have that in your list, tick it off. I'm not saying this is correct. I'm just trying to get a list from us in the room. Yeah. Yeah. Financial. Finance. Money. Yeah. Spiritual. Oh, okay, sorry. I've just been told that spiritual makes it 11. So we've all learned something today, which is good. Which is... Yeah. What's the next one? Okay. Next one, mental. Mental/psychological. Okay, so if you've got mental/psychological, or some people may call it emotional, you can tick that off. Verbal abuse. Institutional. Cyber. Online bullying, yeah. Yeah. Trafficking. Okay. Okay, so does anyone else have anything more than what's listed here? Okay, so we'll work our way around, we'll come back. Okay. FGM. Okay, so we've got a couple of additions. We'll work our way around the room, so don't worry, we'll come around, and whatever's missing, we'll add. FGM, and then you've said sexual orientation as well, yeah. Anything else? Modern slavery. Okay. So for those that don't know, FGM is female genital mutilation. It's when young girls are subject to surgery to take away certain parts of their body. I won't go into too much detail. Okay, is that everything else? Okay, table behind. What else have we missed? What else do you have? No, it's the table behind. Sorry? Inappropriate familiarity with no boundaries. Okay. No. Racial. They've just mentioned racial. Blackmail. Okay. And what's next after black? Is that it for that group? Okay, cool. That's it. Group behind you, is there anything we've missed? Neglect. We've got domestic abuse. No, exploitation. So exploitation, yes. And you said radicalization? Okay. Okay. Table behind, is there anything we've missed? No? Anything we've missed from any of the tables in the middle here? Institutional? Okay. This, institutional. Okay, we've institution twice. Anything else that we've missed? Yeah. Okay, so socio-economic background. Okay. Okay, so the tables now in the middle and at this end, is there anything that you feel that we've missed? We've got modern slavery. Gender? We've listed sexual orientation. Yeah, we've listed sexual orientation, gender, we're kind of, it's different things, but for the sake of today, we're not going to go into the full. We've got mental, psychological, self-neglect. But self-neglect, yeah. Okay. Okay, so is there anything that we feel that we've missed? We've got that. Institutional, organizational. Okay, do we feel that's everything? Do you want to know the actual list? So if you had physical abuse, you were right. Thank you so much for your help. Can we give a round of applause? So this list is quite interesting because some of these aren't abuse. But it's very interesting that we think they are. It's very interesting that we're aware of it as well. Next one. So CSE, child sexual abuse, is listed under sexual abuse. So it's not two separate things, but it's managed differently. So depending on what you report, how it's managed is different. So how many of us know the legal age of consent in the UK? 16. Are you aware that even if someone is 16, 17, and they're in an intimate relationship, the parents can still pursue a prosecution against the person who has slept with them, even if they're over the legal age of consent, because they're still legally a child. So just because the age of consent is 16 doesn't mean that until 18 they're an adult. So if anything happens to a 16, 17-year-old, prosecution can still be persecuted against that person. So it's just something worth knowing, something to keep at the back of your mind. Organizational abuse, acts of neglect or omission, self-neglect. This is one a lot of people think, really? It's a type of abuse? It is a type of abuse. Financial or material. This is one we kind of expected. Psychological or emotional. Domestic violence or domestic abuse. So the law has changed to include domestic violence and domestic abuse. And last but not least, well, after discriminatory, is modern slavery. Those are the 10 types of abuse. So it's interesting we have this giant list, but certain things like trafficking is included under other things. So trafficking could be under modern slavery. If you're moving someone from A to B, it depends on the intent for trafficking, for instance. If the intent for trafficking is to permit sexual abuse, then it's a sexual offense. If the intent is to gain financially from them, then it's modern slavery. So it all depends on what the intentions are. So some of this stuff is really interesting, but the cyber stuff is tackled completely separately. It's not considered, for the case of this, abuse. I have a question. I will go into explanations on every single one, because self-neglect is one that we struggle to understand, but someone can actually choose to neglect themselves to the point that we have to intervene. They can have such disregard for themselves, could be based on an emotional problem or mental health issues. They could care to a point they don't care about themselves. And so then you have to intervene on their behalf to safeguard them from themselves, which is a really difficult case. So we have these 10 types of abuse. I'm going to get us to quickly, still in our groups, we're going to think about indicators. If abuse is occurring, and I said this at the beginning, the human body wants to tell you abuse is occurring. The human body was never designed to suffer with abuse. If we read the Bible, we understand what God has said, we were never designed to cope with the things that we're experiencing now. We were designed to enjoy God's presence and be in the garden and be eating fresh fruit every day and chilling with lions and tigers and bears. And now we're having to deal with work and with all these other things. Work isn't abuse, but it's hard. And so part of this is whenever we're under strain or under stress, our body will react. Our body will respond. Our body will give indicators to let us know that something is wrong. And so as leaders, I'll come to this. I kind of got a flow. I can't break it. Sorry. As leaders, we need to be aware of indicators. If we're not aware of indicators, we won't spot things. And if we don't spot things, things will happen under our very eyes. So what we're going to do, I have to keep flowing. Sorry. It's always the victim. Safeguarding is always about the victim. The perpetrator is to be dealt with by the law. That's what the law and the Crown Prosecution Service is for. Our job is to safeguard victims, not the persecutor. If they are perpetrating crimes and they're unaware, then the law will deal with them differently. But ignorance is no excuse under the law. And so if you're abusing someone and you say, oh, I wasn't aware, the law doesn't count. It's still abuse. How the courts treat with you or deal with you may be different. So the courts may deal with you more leniently if you did it by mistake as opposed to purposeful. So what I want us to think about is what would be happening in someone's behavior? What would be different if Fred was being abused financially? What would I notice about Fred that would let me know that someone's abusing Fred? For instance, would Fred go from wearing Armani and Versace to wearing Primark, or Primani, as someone told me it was called today? What would we be looking for? So I just want us to take a few minutes in our groups again. We're aware of the 10 types. Do you want me to put the 10 types back up? Okay. The 10 types of abuse. And I want you to think for every type of abuse, what would you be looking for to let you know it's happening? Because if we're not looking for the indicators, the abuse could be taking place and it's just happening. So I just want us to have a think. I'm going to give us about 15 minutes to do this, and then we'll take a little break. I just want you to think, what would be happening? What would you notice in the victim that makes you think something is happening? Yeah, I did. Sorry, this is per table. So as a table, come together, look at the different types of abuse, and think about what the indicators will be. Please do not use Google. I know young people at the back, don't use Google. This is just about what you think you would see, what you think you would observe. Okay. So I'm really mindful of our time. Okay. So we've had a little bit more than 15 minutes. And I'm going to quickly, because I'm mindful of time, and I've got some really juicy scenarios that I want us to go through. Sorry, are we all here? Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is just go through some indicators. Yeah, this list is not exhaustive because everyone is slightly different. This is just to give you an indication. So if I'm talking about physical abuse, these are some of the things I'm looking for. And I think the list makes sense, but some of these that we need to think about is little things. If someone flinches when they come near you, yes, they could just be jumpy. But actually, if they've been physically abused, they may be weary of touch. And so this is why it's so important. We as believers, we like to hug each other. If someone's been physically abused, the last thing they need is 35 people hugging them every Sunday. It's true, because you're reinforcing you have no control over your body. And so it's really, really mindful. Read the room, read the scenario, read the person. If they come in, they look all grumpy, there may be a reason. Hey, how you doing? Invite permission. Can I give you a hug? I even encourage pastors before laying hands, ask for permission. Can I lay hands on you? Because if you don't, that's assault. You have touched that person without their permission, and you've recorded it on your live stream to evidence it too. So permission is really important. Can I give you a hug? If you walk towards each other, if you're family, if you feel like your family, you can embrace, and that's safe for you, that's fine. But if it's someone you don't know, be aware, be cautious. You don't know what's going on with that person. And actually, we've had times where an allegation's been made against person A when person B did something, but it's because of how the mind processes. So these are some of the things that you'd expect to see. This is not exhaustive. It depends on the person. I will put this list out so you don't have to write everything. But these are some of the things that you should be looking for. Always see if someone's dressed appropriately. That's a huge sign for a lot of different types of abuse. Is it the middle of summer and they're wearing a polo neck? Why is she wearing a polo neck and it's 35 degrees outside? Is she covering a bruise around her neck? Is she covering a bruise on her arm? Is he covering a bruise? Is that person appropriately dressed? Is it middle of winter and they're wearing shorts? Why are they wearing shorts in the middle of winter? They're telling you, look at me, something is wrong. So their body's crying out to you. Their body's telling you something's wrong, and what they need is for you to observe. Now, not every time is this an indicator of abuse. Some people just don't know what to wear appropriately. But it's for you to have a conversation with your safeguarding team. Every church should have a safeguarding team and a safeguarding lead. And when you think, if you have a feeling, I always encourage people, if you think something is wrong, don't ignore it. Don't ever make that mistake of, oh, it could just be me. Have the conversation. It may not just be you. There may be 7 or 8 people that have noticed something, and the moment you all talk together, you'll go, wow, actually, I saw this, and I saw that. Oh, I saw this, I saw that. And you put a picture together, and all of a sudden, you have a safeguarding issue. Next one, sexual abuse. Some of the things that we may expect. Some of this you may not see. Some of this you will see. If someone has been sexually abused, it will affect on them. If somebody's sleep pattern suddenly changes, why are they not sleeping? Why is it every Sunday they come in, they haven't slept? Oh, my sleep pattern's terrible. And this is not an opportunity. Let me just pray for you. What's happening? Why? What's changed your sleep pattern? Oh, I struggle to sleep. For instance, are you aware that if you wake up at a certain time, as a trainee counselor, I can roughly tell what's wrong with your mental health based on the times you wake up at night. If you wake up around 4 or 5 in the morning, you have anxiety most times. And we can tell based on your sleep pattern because your REM cycles. So it's really important you're having conversations. How did you sleep? Next one, organizational abuse. One of the ones I put there is name calling, inappropriate ways of addressing and nicknaming people in church. We do this a lot. And it's familiarity, but actually it's a form of organizational abuse. Someone has a name. And, I've seen people do to kids, hey, chubby, or whatever. And we think it's a joke. Actually, it can be deeply, deeply hurtful. And so it's really important. Don't give someone a nickname unless they've chosen it. And if they've chosen a nickname, why don't they want to be called by their own name? What's going on? And so it's really important. Us as churches, we don't perpetuate the things that happen in the world. Kids get bullied all the time. Oh, they call them nicknames. They call them this. I knew someone at the church used to call her a nickname. And I remember asking my mum, what does that mean? And my mum said it means, new wife. And I was like, but she's been married like 15 years. And mum was like, it just stuck with her. I was like, well, why is it just stuck with her? And it was something she had no issue being called. She quite liked it, but for me, it didn't make sense. And so it's to find out what's going on. Yeah?
Very kind of sad. Some people that it's also where, if that happens, but they will be okay whilst they are in the church. But the moment they leave the church is when they will then done for you.
Yeah, that's very true. Because if someone's happy while they're in church, and they go to school or they go to work and they tell them, in my church, that the pastor calls me chubby. Sister Chubby in the choir. That email will leave that desk in about 25 seconds flat. You will get a phone call from the safeguarding team within minutes, and they will be coming to your services. They will have watched all your live streams before you know. And they do, believe me, safeguarding services watch your live streams. If there's a report about you, they would have watched your live streams. They will know what you do. So it's really, because we put all this information out there so that we can reach the lost. Remember that they will also look at it to catch you if you're doing incorrect things. So it's really important on how we do this. Neglect or acts of omission. We need to be really mindful, especially for our older people. How many of us have over 60s in our churches? 60, 65 plus. As people get older and they start to retire, things change. Some of them, the worst financial abuse that occurs or acts of neglect is from the children to their parents. As their parents get older, kids don't mean to do it. And this is one of the things that we talk about, willful neglect. Some neglect is willful. Some neglect is just, it's done in a different way. So sometimes it's done by forgetfulness. Oh, I forgot to make mum's meal, a child may say. Oh, I rushed out and I forgot to put it in the microwave. It's still neglect, but we understand that there was no intent. Other times it's that woman was wicked to me my whole childhood. Now she's 65, I will get her. And some people never say it, but that's what's in their mind. And so that is a form of abuse. And as churches, as people get older, we need to be mindful. If someone's been tithing themselves and all of a sudden they were given electronically and one Sunday they come and they start giving cash. Oh, sis, why are you giving cash? Oh, my kids control my money now, so they only give me cash. Okay. I would start watching that. Because if they're controlling the money, what else are they controlling? And so it's not that they're being abusive or neglectful. Nothing may be wrong, but something may be wrong. And so it's just to pay that, get that thing, lock it in your mind. Ask a question, have a conversation, monitor the situation. And if you notice that a woman that was dressing well, all of a sudden is dressing badly, all of a sudden she's losing weight, there's probably some neglect taking place there. And it may not be that the kids are being evil, maybe that they've just not paying attention. In this world, we're so busy nowadays that they may have forgotten. They may have forgotten to order their mum's Meals on Wheels or something. And the mum doesn't want to be a trouble or burden on her kids. So it's really important that we're looking out for these things. And especially as leaders, we just need to be mindful. If someone starts showing signs of confusion, ask them. Have a conversation. Note what they say. Have a conversation a few days later. See if it's changed. If it's changed, there's a reason. See, in counseling, we say there's no such thing as confusion. The mind separates something. And it's either conscious or subconscious. The mind is actively choosing to disassociate because it doesn't want to remember something, or it's subconsciously disassociating, but it is disassociation. And so we need to be looking and trying to figure out what's happening there. Now, self-neglect is one that's slightly harder to view. So some people, because of what they're going through and how they feel about themselves, they just don't care about themselves. They've lost the value of who they are. It could be due to trauma, it could be due to all sorts of things. And so the first thing you'll notice with them is that they'll be changing their behavior. Hoarding is a form of self-neglect. Are you aware of that? But that may also link to a mental health issue because the person may be experiencing loss. And so if they've experienced loss, they won't hold on to everything. I'm not going to let anything go because it means something to me. And so there's a conversation in there. Hey, sis, I went to your house and there were 15 newspapers from the 12th of November. And she may say, oh, that was the day I got married. Okay, that's not a hoarding issue. But if there's 50 newspapers, what's that for? Oh, I just like to keep one for every day and I've been doing so for the last 10 years. Okay, then we need to have a conversation. It may be an issue. There may be something going on there. And people want you to find out something's wrong. This is the really incredible thing I've discovered. People want you to know there's something wrong. They don't want to hide it. No one wants to suffer in silence. Yeah, almost done. Financial or material abuse. This one is quite self-explanatory, and this happens a lot to our older people, but it also happens to some younger people. Younger people can be financially exploited. I've noticed fraud or getting involved in runs. Young people know what I mean by runs. Yeah. They've just made a sign on that table. Young people know, youth leaders know. Be aware of financial abuse. There's lots of things that say to young people, hey, we'll give you put this check in your account, it's £8,000, you give us 6,000, you keep the rest. It's fraud. And then the young person ends up saddled with huge debt, bank account is shut, their credit rating is damaged, and most times they hide it from their parents. And so lots of stuff's happening. If all of a sudden your child goes, where's your bank card? I don't have it. Who has your bank card? Those are the questions we need to be having, those conversations. No one should be having your bank card unless it's you. It's an offense to have someone else's bank card on you. So it's really important that we're aware of what's going on. In terms of psychological, so this one, I've put in there about the deprivation of liberty. So this is really, really important. A lot of the time, psychological abuse isn't seen as a big thing. Oh, it's just training. So I've heard people say, oh, it makes a child strong. It doesn't make a child strong. It's abuse, and what it does is it sets a child up for a life of abuse. I've worked with abused people. The first question we ask them is, did you ever witness violence or aggression or this at home? And they go, yes. And my risk assessment radar goes to the top because a parent and someone else has normalized abuse for them. And if you've normalized abuse, that means the next person that abuses them can build on what you've started. So you think screaming and shouting at them is fine. The next partner will scream and shout and will grab her by the throat. The next one after that will scream and shout and punch her in the face because abuse will egg up every single time. And so if we normalize things that are wrong, it gets worse and worse and worse. And so I tell people, if you're that het up about the situation, don't say anything. Give yourself some time to think about it because you can hurt a lot in anger. How many of us have had someone say something in anger that's hurt us and has stung us? And that's the power of words when used in anger. So it's really important, especially as parents. When my kids drive me nuts, I don't say anything. There's a time I was really upset with my son. I came home and he was like, Dad, and I was like, just go upstairs. Dad needs to spend some time with Jesus before he talks to you. And I did. I got my keyboard out. I did some worship. I was cool. Now we can speak, because before I'd have been like, what is that? So I needed Jesus to help me out. So domestic violence. Domestic violence is one of these strange ones that because we have 16-year-olds that can also be included in this, it's kind of double classified. So domestic violence for over 18s and under 18s. So anyone under 16, the police will deal with it pretty much differently. They'll just come all guns blazing. Over 16, they understand that you're an adult. You're not an adult, but you're not a child. So there will be conversations. There'll be a little bit more in there. But for the purpose of safeguarding, we will apply it differently. So it's just to be aware of this. So I'm really mindful of our time, so I'm trying to get through because you'll really enjoy the end bit. Discriminatory abuse. This is just for us as churches to be really, really aware. We cannot discriminate based on any of these things, and we shouldn't discriminate based on any of these things. We need to love people like Jesus would love them. Change happens in relationship. And if we bring people into relationship with God, change happens. It's just a byproduct. You can't be in relationship with Jesus and not change. If there's anything on here that's causing an issue We don't discriminate. We bring them to Jesus. And lastly, but not least, modern slavery. So this is one of the newer ones. And modern slavery is usually considered an international crime where people are trafficked. And so this is where trafficking comes in. And modern slavery is particularly terrible because it damages the person in such a deep way because there's usually trust involved. You trust somebody that they come and they promise you, I'll take your child to another country and I'll give them a great life. And you believe them and they say they're going to, and then they traffic the child, they steal their passport, they sell them out. Now, modern slavery will, depending on what happens, if there's a sexual element, it will be considered sexual abuse. So if it's sexual, if there's anything in there that has, if they're trafficked for sexual offenses, it will be considered sex abuse and it will be dealt with as sex abuse. If they're trafficked for financial exploitation, that's what it is. So a lot of the times when you go to car washes, how many of you notice that statistically, there's lots of statistics around car washes, but when you go there, you notice that some of the people don't speak English. Their dressing is quite shabby. All these things, there is actually a helpline that if you spot that, you're meant to report it. Because car washes are one of the places primarily that modern slavery occurs. People are brought in, forced to wash cars day in, day out. It's a massive cash business. They can make hundreds, if not thousands, and these people are paid nothing. Some of them sleep in those same places. And so we as the church and as believers just be aware of modern slavery. It's really quite horrific what it does. I'm really mindful of our time. Do we want like a 5-minute break or do we just plow through? We've got 25 minutes left. Want to go through? We should go through? Okay. Okay. We're going to quickly jump then onto the principles of safeguarding. This is what you all came for. And these are the 6 principles of safeguarding. And so it's really important. I'll go through this and I'll go through the scenarios really quickly. It's really important when you're working with someone that's been safeguarded who has suffered abuse that we empower them. There's nothing worse than we re-victimize the victim by taking away all their power. They've just gone through a really horrific experience, and then we tell them, we're going to make this decision on your behalf. We've just re-traumatized them. So one of the principles, and I put like the top and then a little bit of explanation, is that we ask. We try and have a conversation. Sometimes they won't have power. If they're a 15-year-old child and they've just disclosed to you that they were raped or sexually assaulted, you have no choice but to make a phone call. And part of that process is go, I'm really sorry. I need to empower you and to explain to you what's going to happen. I have no choice over this. I'm going to make a phone call. The police are going to come. Certain things will happen. I'm really sorry, but this is what's going to happen. But you let them know what's going to happen. If they're over 18 and they make a disclosure to you, it's a whole different thing. You cannot call the police if an over 18 has been raped. It is their decision. So even if you call the police, they will not take the report. Because you are not the person. They are legally an adult, unless they don't have capacity, which is incredibly hard. So you have to encourage them, but it's their decision. It's their choice. It's up to them to make that decision, which is really hard. I can see lots of people going, wow, they're an adult. And so legally, if they're an adult with capacity, this is where safeguarding is hard. If they're an adult with capacity and they make that decision, it's on them. Second principle, prevention. It's better to take action before harm occurs. So as churches, one of the things that we do is we DBS our workers. Do you do an interview for anyone that wants to work with young people? No? Okay, my advice, there's this thing called a Warner interview. Go online, Google Warner interview, and do that. Anyone that wants to work with children, young people, vulnerable people anyway, do what's called a Warner interview. And a Warner interview is about you question why they want to work with people. Warner, W-A-R-N-E-R. And I believe this came out of some certain inquiries and things like that. You're looking at their motivation for wanting to work with vulnerable people. There's a reason that people want to work with vulnerable people. Some people, it's because they are what we call the wounded healer. They were hurt when they were a child or hurt through circumstances, and they want to help others. And the wounded healer is good, but will breach boundaries because they're not healed. If you're a healed wounded healer, that's fine. Lots of people, without sounding bad, lots of people in the NHS, wounded healers. Lots of people in counseling, wounded healers. Lots of people in psychology and in stuff like that, wounded healers. You'll find a lot of people, without sounding rude, if I get 100 people that worked in the NHS, I'll be able to link back and find a trauma that happened in their life that links to why they work in the NHS. Not everyone, but for a majority, because they haven't resolved their trauma. They want to fix other people, and that's why they work in the NHS. So it's really important we know our motivations. We want to prevent harm. And so why do you want to work with vulnerable people? Why do you want to work with kids? Is it a sense of power? Some people have no power in their life, so they want the power. They want to dominate. And you see them, and they'll tell, shut up, sit down. Some people, it may be other motivations. It may be more sinister, because children won't tell you that they're being abused. And so why do you want to work with vulnerable people? What is it about this age group or this group of people that makes you want to do this? And I question people. I've refused people jobs because I interviewed them and I was like, there's something wrong about your intentions. It's really important we challenge why you want to do this. Because it's not, who wants to work with vulnerable people? Unless God has put it in your heart, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't pay well, firstly. And so it's worth having these questions and worth having this conversation. This next one's proportionality. In terms of safeguarding, how invasive do we need to be? Can we do this in a way that has the minimal intrusion into this person's life? If we have to get all up in and check everything and change, how do we do this? If we suspect financial abuse, can we contact the police and contact the bank and the bank will check their records? Do I have to sit in their house and go through every single piece of paper? That's so intrusive. So there are ways and there are means, and this is why it's so important that we understand if someone's been abused, how we respond to it matters. Protection. This is really important. Sometimes we have to support the people that have been hurt. And sometimes everyone comes in, all the agencies. I've made safeguarding reports, and all the agencies turn up, and police cars turn up, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm going to have the conversation. One of you's going to come up with me, the rest of you can stay in your car. Because if not, you're about to freak someone out. It's just made a disclosure. Some of you are laughing because you know what happens. All the agencies turn up at once. And they're well-meaning, but someone's just made a horrific disclosure about something that's really painful that just happened, and 30 people are going to come into a room, or 10 people are going to come into a room and ask them to retell the story. It's too much. So you find someone, and some of this is our job is to protect this person after they've made this disclosure. We need to make sure, okay, you've said this, how do we manage this best to cause the least amount of trauma? Because you've just exposed your trauma. Second to last, partnership. This is something we don't do very well, I've got to be honest. We get afraid of social services. True? We hear social services and people panic. Immediately people say, they want to take my child away. Social services do not want to take your child away. 99.9 out of 100, social services will work with you to keep your child in your home. Because taking your child into care has so many obligations. They become the legal parent for your child. They have to accommodate and provide for your child to the age of 18. Post 18, they have to find your child settled accommodation and support to 21. Social services do not want to take your child. They will only take your child by court order at the worst examples of abuse. Social services will help you more than they'll hinder you because that's what they want to do. And so sometimes as churches, we need to work in partnership. Contact your local safeguarding team. Say, hi, I'm the safeguarding lead for our church. We don't have any safeguarding issues, but we'd love for you to come in and do some training. We'd love for you to come in. And what happens is they then start looking at you going, that's a church that's safeguarding aware. That's an organization. So when something new happens, they tell you. I got recently told of county line stuff that was happening because gangs were exploiting young people. Social worker came and told me because I've created relationships. You're not aware, this isn't in the grapevine yet, but I need to make you aware of something. It's a bit of a secret, but I need to let you know so you can keep your people safe because I have that relationship. Other people around won't know. And so work in partnership. Create those relationships because they help. Last thing, accountability. When someone comes to make a disclosure, please don't promise what you can't deliver. This is really, really critical. I've worked with people and they've gone, I'll help you all the way. And I've gone, shh, she got that wrong. She's not going to help you all the way. She cannot help you all the way. I'm really, really sorry. If someone's disclosed a sexual assault, for instance, the police will come. They'll take them to a specialist unit. You promising you're going to be with them all the way, you cannot be. the police will take them to a specialist unit. So you've broken that promise already. You've made someone vulnerable believe something that you can't deliver. So don't promise what you can't deliver. It's really important just to say, hey, I'll walk with you as much as I'm allowed to. As much as you want to let me in, I'll be in. If you don't want to, that's okay. I'll be here as much or as little as you want. Yeah? Right. We're just going to have a quick think about this. Who is an abuser? I know I wrote 5 minutes, but I think we might have to jump this because I'm just mindful of time. And this is a list of who an abuser could be. It could be anyone. As long as there is a dynamic in power that you have over someone else, you have the potential to abuse them. And as long as we're aware of that, it keeps us safe because we use it carefully. As leaders, we have power. There's churches I've been to where leaders will say, we're going to give an offering now. You're all going to give £1,000. That is financial abuse. Pastor, Come on, we know how that goes. The music's playing, they go, I need 10 people to give £10,000. Come on now, God's going to bless you. And they speak really quickly, or it's really soft, and the strings are playing, and they're emotionally manipulating you. It's called neuro-linguistic programming. It's a psychological ploy, and it works beautifully. They can manipulate into so many different ways. And so we got to be mindful as leaders. Mindful of what we say, mindful of how we do it. It could be anyone. It could be a neighbor. It could be anyone. And so I want us to have our mind switched on. Because sometimes if we look at the unfortunate case of the Sower murders, the murderer was the caretaker in the school. And no one suspected the caretaker. Because it's the caretaker. Who's he? He's got no power. It's the caretaker. Who cares? But it was the caretaker. When you read about it, unfortunately, the stats tell us most murders are committed by people that they know. Stranger murder, you've got more chance of being struck by lightning than being stranger murdered. And so it's people that people know that are going to abuse them. And so I'm not asking you to be suspicious and watching everyone like Inspector Clouseau, but if you think something is wrong, think about it. Why do I feel something is wrong? So, we've got a few minutes left, and I've got some scenarios for you. Now, originally, we had a bit more time, but what I'm thinking is maybe as a group, you each just discuss one scenario, and I'll quickly fly through the answers at the end. But these are some scenarios. Some of these are safeguarding scenarios, some aren't. Some could be false herrings, some could be red herrings. So have a quick read, have a 5-minute discussion at your table. I think we've got the time for that. Choose a scenario. Because some of these are some of the things that I feel that we could encounter. Some of these are based on conversations I've had with people as well. So I'll give us 5 minutes, if that's okay. If you choose one in your table, I know some people will start speaking in tongues. Oh, see, and there's always a table that speaks in tongues. That's a spiritual table. And then God will reveal the answer to them. But I want us all to just take 5 minutes, have a quick conversation on our table. Just choose one of the scenarios, and then have a quick conversation, and your 5 minutes starts now. 3 minutes left. One minute left. Okay. So our time is up. I think we're still talking. Okay. Right. We'll quickly run through the scenarios. Hello, everyone. Okay. Scenario one. Young person has come to you and discloses that their parents have smacked them at home. What do you do? Sorry, I can't hear you. Sorry, everyone. Can we close our conversations? Scenario one. What do we do? Tell the safeguarding lead. Yeah. What else?
We listen to the child first.
Listen to a child first.
Listen and ask questions.
Yeah.
And then after we ask questions, before the child asks questions more, make ask him if the child has got questions and all that. Then we escalate.
Okay, is everyone listening? Sorry, can we have everyone in the room? Sorry, there are groups which are still talking. I'm just going to wait for the people who are still talking because we're trying to be in one room. Sorry. So we had group here would do a safeguarding alert, something safeguarding. This group here would.
We'll call the child for more questions first.
Okay.
And then after that, we will escalate to the safeguarding team. But first of all, we look for the bodies to make sure that if there's any marks or we will ask, sorry.
You would ask.
And then we escalate.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say, yes, you should not be looking for marks on somebody's child. That's a really quick way to get in trouble.
So you just need to step this side. So
Okay, yeah, that's a good point of correction. Yeah, you're not be looking for marks on
release the rope cord.
I'll show you the answer. What you've got to remember is the word I used was smacking. And so, legally, if it's reasonable punishment, there are clauses. Some of this is about being aware of what the law states. Now, I advise parents not to put their hands on their children. Now, some of you will say the Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. But actually, there is wisdom in how you discipline. Because discipline is different from beating. When you beat, you assault. When you assault, you abuse. And when you abuse, you teach them abuse is correct. And so anger must never be a part of disciplining a child. Now, in Scotland and in Wales, the legislation is different. If you put your hand on a child in Scotland and Wales, it is complete different legislation. You are arrestable. England is the only country within our union where smacking is still permissible. Now, as a volunteer of any sort, you are not allowed to smack a child. If you have smacked somebody else's child, or even your own, especially in church where I see people put their hands, I've made it clear, if somebody puts their hands on my child, they are going to prison. I will use every bit of the law possible to ensure that you face a custodial sentence, because I wouldn't do that to my child. If you're angry, go beat your own child. And if you do that, I'll make sure you're locked up too. If you're angry, don't touch somebody. Self-control is one of the fruits of the Spirit. If we're angry, don't put your hands on somebody. You want to correct. Correction does not occur in anger. Violence occurs in anger, because when you're angry, things change in your body, things change in your mind. You lose control for a second. How many of us, honestly, when we've got angry, we're like, oh, wow. Some stuff we've done, we were like, oh, wow. I remember someone cut me up on the road one day, and I started chasing after him. I was like, why am I chasing this guy? What's wrong with me? Because I was then like, what if I catch him? What am I going to do? I'm not going to fight him. I'm not going to, so he cut me up. I've had to kind of come up, and then I'd start, and I'm like, what am I actually going to do? Do you know what I mean? Because then like when you're angry, you're not thinking rationally. And then your brain kicks in and goes, and I love how my brain goes, so what are you going to do when you catch him? And I was like, I don't actually know. So let me just slow down, be in my lane, and God, whatever's caused him to do that today, God, you speak to him. It's really important that we don't get into physicality, especially when you start smacking children. Children associate discipline with pain, and they associate you with pain, and they start associating church with pain and associating God with pain. And so you shut the doors off. And so many people now won't come to church because of the abuse they suffered as a child. And you say, oh, will you come to church with me? And they'll tell you, oh, my friend got beaten up by this and by that, and this one slapped them. I can tell most young people, if I tell you somebody in church, honestly, young people, somebody in church has put their hand on you at least once. True? They're nodding. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. No one should put their hands on anybody. If we have anger management issues, speak to a Christian counselor. Get with someone, work through it, yeah? But what we should be doing is, if someone does smack a child, we need to be reporting that to our safeguarding lead in church, because it could be an indicator of a bigger problem. If they've lost control in church and they're hitting their child in church, what are they going to do at home when you're not there? What they're going to do in the car park when you're not there? What they're going to do? I've heard of kids who like, my daddy pinches me, my mummy pinches me, and I'm like, come on. And the parents like, why are you reporting me? I said, because you're abusing a child that God gave you the right. God gave you that child to nurture. You know, we all stand in front of the pastor when we give birth to our children. They say, do you promise to care and to nurture and all these things? We go, yes. The pastor doesn't say, do you promise to pinch and abuse them? That's not part. I've read the book. That's not part of it. So it's really important that when you're angry, when you're hot, step away. You know, step away. You know, you tell me the Bible says, spare the rod. Okay, and I'll respond to you with this. If we check the context of that scripture, the rod, right, where is Israel? Is it somewhere where there's reeds and stuff that can be easily available? No. So for you to get the rod, you had to travel a distance to get the rod, to come back home to punish the child. Your anger is dissipated by the time you've come home. God in his wisdom, when he allowed you to, gave you the wisdom that your anger would dissipate. By the time you've got all the way to water, and those that have been to Israel, rocky place, by the time you've gone through all of that, to get a rod, to come back, you're like, I'm not even going to touch this child. Who's got the energy for that? So it's just an encouragement. Don't let your anger get the best of you. Work on it. Right. Next one. You notice there's a change in the behavior of a member of the church who's becoming more and more withdrawn. Is this a safeguarding issue? I've put it's not an issue yet. There could be multitude of reasons why someone's becoming withdrawn. Okay. Someone could be becoming withdrawn because they don't like how we preach. I honestly, one of my friends once, I invited one of my friends to my church, and he said, I can't deal with your church. You lot shout too much. Because we preach the African way. And God said, it wasn't that he was being safeguarded as any issue. We were just too loud. So we turned the volume down and people now come. So sometimes it's not a safeguarding issue. Someone just may not want to come to your church. And it's okay. As long as they go to a church, it's okay. My advice, have the conversation. Why aren't they coming? What is it that we're doing? It's a great thing because too often when people leave, we just assume there's something wrong with them. That's why they couldn't stay. The fire of God was too hot. That's why they couldn't stay. I've played at churches. I've spoken to a lot of pastors. So many of you are laughing right now because you know you've heard somebody, you know, in leadership say that. If they could stand the presence of God, they would have stayed in the church. It may not be that. Not every church agrees with everyone. As long as they stay in fellowship with Jesus. Like, if someone comes to me and they tell me, I'm thinking of leaving, I'll go, okay, what are you looking for? Oh, quite, okay, I can recommend 3, 4, 5 churches. Be in partnership with local churches. I don't want you leaving God. If we're too loud for you, if our worship goes on too long, there's a place where they only play the organ, it lasts 10 minutes. Go there. But you stay in Jesus. It's really important. Yeah? Almost there. Someone speaks to you at the end of service and they tell you they're feeling and you suspect they're feeling suicidal. I need to say this. It is okay to ask people if they're feeling suicidal. Just because you ask does not mean you're going to put the thought in their mind. You cannot put the thought in someone's mind that's not already there. If you ask them, are you feeling suicidal? They will tell you most times. And I want to tell you something. This is something of an indicator you need to be really mindful of. If someone is suicidal and all of a sudden they get really, really happy, be very, very concerned. Most times they have decided when and where they're going to end their life. And so they're now happy because they feel they're in control of that situation. So if someone is suicidal and all of a sudden you're on the phone and like, oh, they got baptized in the Holy Spirit and they feel great and everything's happened, I'm raising a safeguarding alert immediately and I'm calling the hospital. We need to have the phone number of crisis teams. We're seeing more and more mental health than we've ever seen before. People are struggling to cope with the things around them. And actually, if someone's feeling suicidal, and this is where I believe in the power of prayer, but not when someone's dead. We need to get them sectioned. And sometimes people don't like when you say things like that because they say it diminishes. No, I've seen God work miracles. I've seen God do the most amazing things. But I've also seen a church where someone came forward in their service and they had a mental health issue, and it was obvious she had a mental health issue. And the pastor did the right thing. They gathered around her. She wanted prayer. They prayed her. They encouraged her. And then the pastor said this from the mic. We're now going to get a taxi for you. We'll get some of our safeguarding team to go with you to the hospital, to the crisis team, and we'll make sure you're okay. Why? Because it's so important. When it's life or death, this is not a time for us to be second-guessing ourselves. If it's life or death, we need to make sure they stay on this side of reality. Call them, make the report, do what you need to do. If they tell you they're feeling suicidal, sometimes you can risk assess, call 111. If they're at imminent risk, call 999. If they ask them, do you have a plan? You can ask them. People will be honest with you. You'd be surprised. People will tell you their plan. And if they have a plan and they've got means, that's a 999 call. It's a danger to life. That is not the time to start speaking in tongues. Speak in tongues once you've made the phone call. I'm not saying this to be disrespectful. Make that phone call. Get them safe, because the police can restrain them. They can put them in temporary hold. They can put them in a psychiatric hold. It's not the best thing, but they're still alive. You know, there was a very sad case I'm aware of, and I'm still aware of our time, where many, many years ago, a lady killed herself and her children. And she'd been to so many different churches, and they all just kept praying. And nobody did a safeguarding referral. And in the end, she killed herself and her children. And people were, oh, what happened? Because no one made the phone call. And so when it's mental health, with all the love and respect in the world, don't play with it. I know we want to, but oh, let me help. I'm trained, and I wouldn't touch it. I'm trained, and my first thing is the phone call straight away to safeguarding team, to crisis team. I've called GPs, and GPs have called me back and gone, you know more than you're doing with this than I do. And I've gone, yeah, I know, but I still need to call you because I have to cover myself. If you don't do the right thing for your church, you could put yourself at deep financial risk, legal risk, and imprisonment. So it's really, really important. And I want to encourage you as churches, have safeguarding conversations, just to do that. And the last one, you find out a new member of the church has been asking for money. Some of you laughed. Some of us have had this. Have the conversation. Find out what's going on. Are they at financial risk? Are they being exploited? Is something going wrong? Are they just bad with money management? And if they're bad with money management, you can teach them. But it's really important that we have the conversations. Don't be afraid to have a conversation. Safeguarding starts with having conversations. Don't be afraid. Don't go charging in there. Everyone in church has told me that you've been asking for money. You are a thief in that. No. Hey, sis, I've noticed that you've asked so-and-so for money, and you've asked so-and-so for money, and I just want to see if everything's okay. Is there anything we can do to support you, anything we can do to help you? Last couple of things. I'll show you this form, and I'll send it out to you. This is a form that I devised for my church, and we'll send it out to everyone. This is how we record safeguarding. It's so important that you document. This is one of the big things that we as churches fall over. We don't document. We have conversations, we don't email. If I'm having a safeguarding, whoever sends me the form, their name, their date, name the alleged victim, name the alleged perpetrator, if there is one. If I've identified a perpetrator, I need to know who they are, because I may need to safeguard 10, 15, 20 people. I may know things that they are connected to. Time of incident, location. It's really important we jot everything, because if you have to be asked, let's say the police have to speak to you later, and you don't remember these details, you could really hamper an investigation. And when a victim discloses once, they tend to give you a good disclosure. And you don't want to lose critical information. Because imagine if the police come to you and go, oh, when did it happen? You go, Wednesday, Thursday, last week, when? It's so hard, it's so much harder. Have a way of doing this. And on the whole form, then you put in what you saw, what happened, factual details. When you're doing safeguarding, really important thing, take your emotions out of it. I feel, without being rude, in safeguarding is irrelevant at that moment. What happened? What did you witness? What did they say? Sarah said that Michael pushed her and punched her in the face. I feel that Michael's a bad guy. I don't need that for safeguarding. I just need to know what happened. Then any other information, we've created a little slot for you for your feelings and emotions. So you can write, well, actually, I've noticed Michael being aggressive 7 or 8 times before in church. And if you have noticed him being aggressive and you haven't reported it before, then we'll have another conversation. Then this goes to your leaders. So pastors, this is where you become responsible. The moment someone sends you a safeguarding form, you have a legal duty to respond. However, you don't have to inform them of what your response is. So let's say I say something to Pastor Sareka. He doesn't have to tell me if he responds. He just has to let me know he's dealing with it. And as long as he's dealing with it, I've reported it. And so I expect forms to probably start coming in. I've asked for it now. And it's actions taken by your church. Sometimes it may be, if there's an allegation, brother so-and-so, please fellowship online today. Don't come into the building today. I know it sounds harsh, but if there's a safeguarding risk, you may need to tell them, just for today, fellowship at home, we're looking into some things. You need to be seen to take action. If you're not taking any action, you're not protecting anyone. And if someone is abusive, you need to protect them. Have a safeguarding team. How many churches here have a safeguarding team? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's really important, build a safeguarding team. If it's something that you do, have 3 or 4 people, professionals who work in this. There's tons of training out there. Some of it's even free. Have a team that you can discuss with and bounce ideas off each other. You know, if you've got social workers in your church, pull them in. If you've got nurses, doctors, people who have worked in professional areas, pull them in. Complete the form, send it off. Yeah, I think that's all the details on there. Yeah, this is my last thing. And this is just advice. Ensure anyone that works with children and young people has a valid DBS, enhanced DBS. A DBS will show spent, unspent convictions. It's important to have it. There are things the police will choose not to disclose, that's up to them. It's our duty to have the DBS in place. If someone's working with someone vulnerable and they've got previous convictions, you should know about it, and they will explain it to you. I always advise, avoid physical contact unless there's a relationship. I know this sounds really harsh, but it's always advisable because you don't know what someone's going through. You don't know what happened. If they come to you and you want to embrace each other and it's a mutual embrace, that's fine. But so often an embrace can be misconcepted, can be misread. At work, I do not touch my staff team. I do not touch them in any way. If they go high, I do air high fives, which means there's no physical contact with my team because there is no way I can be accused of inappropriate touching. Unfortunately, we live in a world that has changed, and we have to safeguard ourselves in some of these aspects. Finally, please avoid this. It's your auntie, give her a hug. It's your uncle, give him a hug. Schools teach children, no one should touch you without your permission. We then teach them in church. Someone who calls themselves auntie can override that and can touch you. Now, when auntie or uncle is a predator, you've taught that child that their feelings about being touched by an adult can be overridden. You've made it easier, without meaning to, for a predator to predate on them. So I'm not trying to say this to be bad. We have to be careful. There are people who are looking to get access to our young people and to our churches and to our vulnerable. And unfortunately, that's the world we live in. God will protect us, but we will also be wise. Okay, I've got to go. I'm really over my time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Femi. Just one question about the DBS check. I think, many of us in the health industry or, care industry, you already have one. So does the church have to have a separate DBS?
Depends on what your insurance states. Some insurances will be happy for you as long as you've got one. So I've checked, for instance, ours is happy as long as I've got one. It doesn't have to be a specific one. So Pastor Sreka has a copy of my DBS. As soon as it came through, I emailed him a copy, I think, WhatsApp or emailed. Some will insist that your church does it themselves. I would advise you to have one. I'd advise you to also do the online check-in, which means you can just log on and check it. It's a fee that you pay, but it means it's constantly running, as opposed to a snapshot. Anything could happen in 3 years. And so a DBS is a snapshot on a day of what's happened. The day after, someone could commit an offense. And for 3 years, it won't show up. So it's just really important. DBS check your people. Again, some people, depending on your work, you will have multiple. I've got like 2 because of some stuff that I do. Also, some jobs, like I've done stuff with MOD, so you have to have another level of clearance and Official Secrecy Act and all that fun stuff, and they'll search everything, even your mother's, what she ate for dinner last Wednesday. It's really important, though, that we have the DBS in place. So if you don't have one, we can check you, and we can do the process for you, but it's really important that we just get them in place. And when you do the DBS, please use your government name, not your other name, because sometimes people are like, oh, I'm Mary, but their government name is like Olafunke or something, and then we can't find Mary on the system for 90 days. So it's really important that your DBS is in your legal name.
Thanks, Femi. Let's give Femi a hand.